Okay, today we have Matt Mitter, known as the Valuator, and he's been airing his horse racing tips here on Castledown Radio over the last 3 months with great success, Matt. Today we will find out more about Matt and how Valuator came about. Hi Matt, so when did you first have an interest in horse racing?
I suppose, like most families, you had like the Grand National, you know, Nan and Mum and Dad would. It was the only time they had a bet really, and they'd go off to the local independent just down the road at Tidworth.
Yeah.
And I used to have to stand outside, you know, and wait. You know, if you were under 16, you couldn't get in. But I often crept in and just sort of seeing what was happening. I used to enjoy the National, watching it with a family, with no success at all, just picking names out of it. Yeah. You know, names like we all do. And then I guess from there, I left school, and my local was the Boot, where I live in Shipton Bellinger. And Tony McCoy, around that time, I'm going back, so you know, he was probably champion jockey for the second time. He lived in Amesbury, and quite often popped into the Boot on a Saturday night after racing for a meal. Yeah. And because he didn't drink, he used to take a few of us into town. You know, way back then. Barry Fenton, Liam Cummins, Seamus Durack, they all visited, you know, in their spare time. So
well, that sort of nurtured your interest.
Yeah, it did. And lucky for me, it was Grand National winning jockey Richard Guest was friends of some people just local in Shipton. And he was riding for, I think it was Mr. Mason at the time. And my first ever bet was him riding with Mr. Mason. And I went into Tidworth, and I must have been 18. And yeah, both of them won. You know, it was a 5-1, 8-1. I forget what the horses were called, but of course then I was hooked. Yeah. So I carried on most weeks, definitely on Saturday in my spare time, would go up and just have, you know, my 5 a bit here, my 5 a bit there. With not great success. But it used to fascinate me, the fact that when you walk into a betting shop, there's all form around the walls, but no one was paying no attention to it, and they were just looking at the screens and writing slips out. And yeah. I thought, well, there must be information here to help you better your chance. So it was a bit of self-taught, really. I'd watch a race, and then the winner, then I'd look at its form, and then you see repetitive things start coming into play. And of course, with that, my betting improve somewhat, not a great, you know, a great deal.
So you started to see patterns in the form.
In the form,
yeah.
So it was only at that time very basic form, Alan, as if it was that. But that was the start, right, really, of the you know, my love of horse racing.
And you worked in a betting shop for a while.
Yeah, I worked for a betting shop. It must have been 2000 and. I don't know, yeah, about 2000, 2001 I think it was, in Birmingham. I worked for a bookmaker there, which I really enjoyed, because I'd been in and out of different employments, couldn't find anything that I wanted to do really, and I couldn't hold down a job. It was all about, really, that my only interest at the time was really horse racing, and of course it certainly wasn't happening at that time from my betting. So we had to think about doing something else, and I met a girl, she lived in Birmingham, so I went up there and we sort of set up and got a flat and what have you, and I got a job in an independent, and then made it to kind of shop manager from there, and I really enjoyed it, and I lived and breathed a sort of betting shop, and still used to have my bets in the betting shop, and kind of learned, I've seen a lot of people, you know, doing their money quite often. Yeah. And again, I was always concentrating, looking at the form, and just self-taught. And at that stage, I had no one was really guiding me or showing me. It was really just watching, all the time.
And what was it like being on the course with the course bookie?
Yeah, that come a little bit later. That came, my relationship broke down. So I moved back down south. So then I had to leave my job at the time, and then a couple of years later, me and the particular girl, we decided to give things another go. Oh. So I wasn't in a particularly good place at that time in my life. I had no sense of direction of what I wanted to do, and I felt actually quite down and depressed having left the job.
Yeah.
That it was a job that I really loved doing, that I couldn't do anymore, and that I attempted to join a few bookies more locally, which wasn't successful at the time. So I made my way back to Birmingham, and to be to be honest, I was skint.
Yeah.
And I think I went there, I had £100 and nowhere to live, with this girl. So with the £100, I just booked a B&B for the week, and I think I had something like £30. So what I would do is I used to go to the betting shop,
Yeah.
and I used to make myself £20, which would just pay for my
Yes. Yeah.
my kit, and I managed to do that most days.
This was about 2005.
Yeah,
like that.
2005, and then I used to be in the shop, and this kind of gentleman used to come in, and he'd say, all right, son, what do you fancy today? So more times than not, what I said would be I'd go close anyway, if not win. And I think I've learnt now that he made a point of coming in every day to speak to me, and he was, gave me good advice, or if he thought I was doing something wrong, he would, we'd say, well, this is a group track, this is an ordinary, track, or that, and it was just, I learnt little bits off of him, and then he approached me and said one day, would you like to come and do some work for me? So I said, yes, what do you do? So he said, well, I'm a bookmaker. So I was a bit taken back. He was an on-course bookmaker. So he said, I'll take you on for, a day to start with. So that was Stratford. He was obviously just trying me out,
Yeah.
And then after that day, it turned into 2 days. We did a few more days, and we were based in the Midlands. We was Worcester, Stratford, and his name was Dave. And I learnt an awful lot from him, and I owe him a lot, really, because he always said to me, I'm not going to educate you, I'm not going to pay you to learn, but in your own time, if you want to, after racing, when you get back, if you want to come round. And he was the one who taught me to private handicap.
Right.
And obviously back then there was no computers.
No.
So everything was done by books, by hand. So you can imagine the time it must have taken. And it was all, he used to come to me and say, this is 7 lengths better than that, and that's 4 lengths better than this, and so forth. And then we put it into a number, and that's where, with Value Rater, that's where the ratings, that's where I learnt how to private handicapped horses. And that was probably about a 2-year period for him, and he used to set me homework. He'd say to me, which I was quite proud about, he was like, you've got to do this race for me and tell me which horses you want and what you don't want. So I'd go back home and spend a lot of time and think I'd done it right.
Yeah.
But he was quite hard on me. If I'd go out the next day and he said, no, you haven't done it properly, go and have another look. That was his kind of.
That's the best way to learn.
Yeah. And if I ever was going to have a bet with him, he'd say, you can have your wages early if you want, and if you want to have a bet. And even if he knew that I was having a bet and I was doing something wrong, he would let me know about it after the bet on the way home in the car. He'd say, you know what you done wrong today backing that horse, don't you? So I'd say, well, why didn't you tell me before I've done my money? He said, well, that's the only way you learn.
Yes, it's true.
For doing your money.
So when did you move back down south?
He retired in 2007. Obviously, the exchanges came, and things were changing, and due to poor health, really, he stopped. So I came back down south and took the bold step to go it alone as a professional gambler.
Yeah.
Using mainly at that time exchanges, and I did that for, from then to now, really, this year, with mixed success. It was hard, like anything, you have to pay an admission fee into racing, and that is the only way you do learn, unfortunately, is by doing your money.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, like most other businesses, you have to sometimes give a bit of money to learn along the way, and I did that. There's many ups and downs. I think my family were quite concerned at the time that the nature of work I was going into, and there was at times I was wondering whether I would have to do something else when the rent had to be paid. But I stuck to my guns and I worked hard. I spent hours upon hours reading form and still learning, really.
Yeah. So I understand it was a chance meeting on a train to Sandown Racecourse that changed your approach to racing, really.
Yeah, it was a chance meeting, and it was on the 5th of December 2009. It was the Tingle Creek meeting at Sandown, so I hopped on the train at Greatley, and we got into London, and it was quite, the train was packed, so I've got my bag on beside me, basically trying to say I don't want anyone to sit next to me,
Yeah.
and I've got my
You won't be the first person to do that.
I've got my form next to me, and I just remember him. First impressions, it was just had a great presence about him. It was a tall man, and he said, "Do you mind if I sit down?" So begrudgingly, kind of, with the paper. And we sat down and had a chat, and he was very knowledgeable, and he was going to Sandown to back Summersby, actually, and I was going in the same race to back Crackaway Jack, and they actually finished first and second. He was right. I gave him a winner later on, and just by chance, on the way home on the platform, he went on. His name's Graham Griffiths. So he was, he said, "Oh, you gave me a winner, I gave you a winner," and we kind of like that sat on the train, and we had a chat, and he gave me his number, and he said that he was in the police force. He was high up in the CID as a detective.
Yeah.
So we exchanged numbers, and the rest is history, really. He's such an intelligent man and a great mind of a racing man, and I've never met anyone with knowledge like it. And even though I had an awful lot of knowledge up to meeting him, I appreciate that. But he gave me great confidence, which I think I lacked around that period of time, and not just within racing, but in life. And if we don't speak 3 times a day, then there's something wrong. And he's been my biggest supporter throughout. I mean, if you asked him, he'd sort of say, no, it's all you. But and some of that. But being a detective, obviously his skills that he have in being, a detective,
Sure.
He used with his racing, and he opened my mind up to almost think out the box a little bit. And he made me look at it in a very, very different way. Up to now, we're a little bit different in the way that he reads form. He doesn't use ratings particularly like I do. He has different ways, but both of us come together normally. He's great to bounce off, because there's not very many people. Well, there isn't anyone else I speak to who kind of speaks my language when it comes to reading form, and he's become such a good friend.
Yeah.
With it, and he's right behind me at the moment. So yeah, I couldn't speak any higher of him. He's been really, he's inspired me really to where I am today.
And you've got a great slot here on Castledown Radio, of course, every week now.
Yeah.
And that's working well. And what does the future, you think, hold for Valuator?
It's an exciting time at the moment. I mean, who would have thought, when we had that conversation on the phone, which was just over 3 months ago, that now we're at the stage, and there's so many likes on Facebook and on Twitter, and the success we've had on a weekly level. And I thank you, Simon, and everyone at Castledown Radio for giving me this opportunity to share my knowledge, and I hope it comes across my passion.
Definitely.
For the sport. And I just, I want to attract the sport to a new audience. I want them to see it through fresh eyes. Racing gets a lot of bad press, quite rightly at times, but the positive side of the press gets lost somewhere in the paper. Not necessarily, it's all front page, it's bad news. It's a great sport. Like anything in life, it's a lot of work. I'm not going to pretend it's not a normal kind of life. It is a way of life that I do, but there is research out there. It's never been better. Place racing for website, the information that you can get at a touch of a button, replays, and I just want to express my knowledge, and hope that every Saturday and whenever that you know, people are having a bit of a thrill
Yeah.
with it, and
Well,
with that.
you're always very enthusiastic about your
Yeah,
sport, and
yeah.
you know, and I mean, the success of your last 3 months in monetary value as well as
Yeah.
bringing in more listeners to Castledown has been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. And it's, you know, coming soon. I've obviously got the Observer, Hampshire Observer. I'm writing in that from the 19th of December. That's a massive thing. Sometimes I have to sit down and take a deep breath sometimes, because everything has sort of happened a lot quicker than I ever thought or wished it would, really. And website will be coming soon in the new year. That's good. And obviously we're running the competitions to Newbury. And no, I mean, I'm in a very, very good place in my life.
Fantastic.
Which has probably been the first time in my life which I've actually been content and happy within myself. My family are right behind me. Graham, as I said, he's right behind me every day. You're right behind me, and there's lots of other people that are, and they know who they are as well. And I can't thank you enough for the opportunities that I can get myself.
Thank you,
out
Matt.
there.
Thank you, Matt. And you can hear Matt, of course, at every Saturday morning here on Castledown. Go to castledownradio.info and click the Listen Live button. And, of course, on 104.7 FM in Tidworth and Leicestershire. Matt, thanks for talking to us.
Thanks, Simon.